And I said, yeah, sure. Unknowingly that it was going to lead me to a Lovetown and be totally uncool.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. This episode sees us speaking to the amazing Mark Wallace, or Squeezebox Wally as he's well known in the Australian music industry. Mark, or Wall as you'll hear him called on the show, is an amazing accordion player and keyboard player who's been in the industry for over 40 years, most renowned as part of the iconic Weddings, Parties, Anything band in Australia, but has done so much more than that, and we cover a lot of that in this interview. It's hard to overstate the influence Weddings, Parties, Anything and Mark's playing had on my early adult years. It's just incredible, and you'll hear me talk to Mark about the first gig that I saw him at, and it still remains to this day, even though I've seen probably something like 200 different acts in stadiums and arenas and pubs and clubs all around Australia and overseas. Weddings, Parties, Anything live in Wagga Wagga still remains my number one favourite gig of all time. But we'll talk about that later. So I'll let you jump in and listen to Wall's amazing stories, and I'll see you at the end of the show. Well, it's an absolute pleasure and honour to have you on the show, sir. How are you doing this fine weeknight?
Fantastic, David. It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
We're super thrilled. As I mentioned in the intro, this is one of the more, not nerve-wracking interviews because you're an incredibly approachable guy, but as I've explained in the intro, your music's meant a lot over the years, so it's great to have you on the show. I thought we'd kick off, we'll do it a bit chronological, and we'll go back to the starts, which is starting off with your musical upbringing. So as a kid and into teen years, what got you into keyboards, and in your case, the accordion as well? What was your sort of musical development?
So when I was a little kid, probably 6 or 7, my mum sent me off for some piano lessons. And a couple of months into that, the teacher said to her, look, he's just too young. He's just not doing that. And I kind of left it. And then about a year and a half, 2 years later, Mum said, do you want to learn accordion? Because Mum played accordion. And I said, yeah, sure. Unknowingly that it was going to lead me to a Lovetown and be totally uncool. But I went, yeah, sounds great, accordion. So I started taking lessons, and I was old enough to take it a little bit more seriously. I was about 8, and to practice. And my dad had a band he used to play in, a Scottish dance band called the Merry Macs. And when I was about 12, Dad decided he didn't want to do that anymore. I'm not sure whether there was a falling out with a couple of the guys or not, but he decided to start up a dance band with Mum. So Dad played banjo and mandolin, Mum accordion, me an accordion, and Dad roped in this drummer he knew, Angus, and we used to go out and play all the Scottish dances, the ball, Scotia Ball in Ballarat every year, monthly White Heather Club. So yeah, I was out playing in public from when I was about 12, and we'd do probably 20 gigs a year.
That's amazing. And I do want to ask about the Scottish, because we have a lot of UK listeners, but obviously in the Australian context, Scottish dance bands were absolutely a thing. So I assume we're talking, the 1970s? Early?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were playing sort of in an Australian context, I assume a lot of town halls, community halls, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it would be like the Masonic Hall or whatever the hall was in the area we were playing in. The one we used to do in Oakley, this suburb of Melbourne, was the Purple Heather Club, which was the sister gig to the White Heather Club, which has been going for years. And Dad started up the one close to us. And it turns out years later, there's a great little gig in Melbourne called the Caravan Club, which is now down in Archers Creek, but it started in Oakley. And I walked into the hall the first time we played the Caravan Club at the RSL there, and I went, shit, this is where I used to play as a kid once a month with the Purple Heather Club. It was quite a buzz.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, I mean, so you actually had decent, gig experience and stage experience. I mean, I know you don't have a a writhing mob of punters up against the stage. You've got a bunch of
writhing mob of waltzing old people. Yes.
Exactly. And I assume in kilts a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, it was once a year they might have the ball where all the guys would come in the kilts and they'd pipe in the haggis with the bagpipe and all that kind of stuff. But generally it was a pretty casual get-together. You play the Scottish dances and you play what is called 50-50. So there's Pride of Erin, Modern Waltz, two-step, all that kind of stuff. And they're all set dances.
Yeah. You're taking me back. And so, doing that, I mean, when you finished up school, what was sort of the segue between doing that sort of stuff to actually deciding, well, I want to actually do a bit of music? Or did it happen by fluke? Were you teaching? What were you sort of doing?
So I played with Mum and Dad with the Don Wallace Entertainers, as we were known, till I was about 20, maybe even 21, probably 20. And we were doing the occasional gigs still, and I joined the weddings by then. Mick found my name from a music teacher of mine and rang around all the different students to see who would want to audition, and I auditioned. I just wanted to put it into... I love modern music. I'd watch Countdown every week and I listened to 3XY and I was obsessed by modern music and I was really excited to try and put it into something modern. But I know we had one New Year's Eve that was permanently booked with Mum and Dad. And when I started with the weddings, Mick said, oh, shit, we've got a gig offer that, I don't know, might have even been like, I know we did one with Paul Kelly at the venue in St Kilda one year, and it might have even been that. And I had to say to Mum, look, sorry, I've got a gig, I can't do it. And she was pretty annoyed, but whatever.
Yes.
They got over it pretty quick. She was a bit pissed off with Mick for a couple of years, I reckon, but she came around to it and came and saw us a few times. She liked it.
Yeah, I was about to say, did your parents get to see you in full-fledged action with weddings, parties, anything? And what did they think?
I can't actually remember if Dad did. He might have. He died in his early 60s, and the band were just starting to kick off. We'd been going a couple of years, but Mum saw us a few times, yeah.
Yeah, great.
And she was very proud. She thought it was a bit loud, but she was very proud.
Absolutely. No, that's excellent. And so, as you've mentioned, Mick found you by sort of, as I said, he was calling around accordion teachers, looking in the phone book back in those days. I think, did he write you a letter and sort of gave you a tape or something? Tell us a story about how that came about.
Well, he looked up teachers in the phone book, and one of the ones he looked up was my teacher, or my ex-teacher actually, the guy I used to learn off up until I was about 14, 15, and I changed music schools after that. But it was actually through the first guy, and he said he got a list of ex-students, and he was given about 4 or 5 different names. Wrote me a letter with a cassette, and the list of the songs on a piece of paper, and said, do you want to learn these and come for an audition and in his house in Brunswick? And I went out there not knowing what the hell this is all about. I don't know. I was a suburban kid. I didn't understand indie pub scene in Melbourne. I've barely been out to any of those places. I was just maybe 19. And I really liked it. And I thought, oh, Jeff, this could be something. And he made the mistake at the end of the interview, at the end of the rehearsal, and obviously it went pretty well, saying, oh, what do you think of this guy? And I said, no, you wouldn't. He'd be no good. And he reeled off 3 or 4 names, and each one I went, look, he's a good player, but I don't think he'd get this kind of stuff like I would. I've been brought up playing Scottish music, and I know folk music, and I love pop music, so I think I'll be the best of all of these people. He went, oh, okay. And had it gone well enough for him to not pursue that. But, they were all good players, the other kids, but
it's what it takes. It's about
not as good as me.
That's right. That's amazing. And so, do you recall what it was like those first when you were rehearsing for those gigs? So I know it was marginally after. I know there'd been an original accordion player, Wendy, you'd taken over. So they'd already been gigging. So what was sort of the learning curve to get up to scratch to be able to start playing gigs? How much notice did you have?
Well, for a start, she wasn't an accordion player. She was a violin player.
Apologies. Right.
No, that's all right. No. So he'd done about a year's worth, and I'd just done a handful of gigs, and or wasn't really doing anything. And we decided to change it up with the accordion. And I can't remember. I think not long after we started playing that, I think our first gig was a party in Paran, South Yarra, around there. A friend of Mick's, might have been even his girlfriend at the time. I'm not even sure. Park Place in South Yarra. And so that was just to kind of get our eye in. And then we did a gig out in St Andrews, which is sort of the outer fringes of Melbourne, the bushy suburbs near Eltham and Warrandyte. And so, but there seemed to be gigs happening reasonably regularly. And we're just, finding our sound and our way, I suppose. But yeah, then we started a regular residency in Fitzroy at the pub called the Giulietti Hotel. And that was really the start of it.
Yeah.
And it was a weekly residency there.
Wow, weekly.
Thursday nights, and built it up from, I reckon, 10 people the first night to full house about 6 months later, and we had to move to other venues.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so, I mean, really before, because the first album release was Scorn of the Women in 87. So you really had nearly 3 years, sort of 2 and a bit years of gigging experience and working experience as a band before you went into the studio for that first album. So did you feel like you had the chops and you were just feeling quite confident to go in and record? Or, I mean, that's obviously a whole different experience.
Oh, it was totally different. We did little bits and pieces before the album. There was an EP we put out not long after we were going, with a 4-track one. Pretty sure we recorded 6 tracks, and the final 2 tracks went on a little compilation cassette of little local bands that Mick put together as well too. He was quite the entrepreneur in those days, and kind of still is, And then there was a live single we released, and then into the studio, Sing Sing Studios in Richmond to record the first album, and that was not a great experience for anyone. And we were out of our depth, and we were led in paths that we didn't really like and were uncomfortable about, and it was put on ice after about 2 weeks because we'd recorded nothing and spent a fortune.
Yeah.
At the behest of this producer and engineer at the time.
And so how did you end up with the final, I mean, we Scorn of the Women, the final product? Did you end up being happy with that in the end?
I still don't love that record.
Yeah.
I love the songs on it, and there's some parts of it which are fantastic. And it is idiosyncratic of a young band coming up at the time, and it sounds like they had lots of problems in the studio to me, but I can hear that. Other people probably can't.
Yeah.
But so I reckon with probably 2.5 weeks in this studio, and we put down 4 rhythm tracks, really, and I had the producer and the engineer just giving me grief about being an accordion player because I didn't think it was cool enough, and hiding it and all sorts of shit. It was pretty traumatic, really. I thought, what the fuck am I doing here? There's one time they decided they couldn't they didn't want accordion on this track, and they tried to get me to play it, and it would go through this MIDI machine and then spit out a keyboard part at the end. I mean, I could have just fucking played keyboards, but whatever. They wanted to do that and try to keep me happy. But because of the frequency, and there was pretty old technology then, 1986, 85, 86, so it just couldn't cope with the accordion. There's all these frequencies coming off every note, and it was just sending it all over the place, and it was just nonsense. And they're all going, what's happening? What's happening? Why is it doing that? And Mick said, it's a fucking accordion, idiots. Anyway, so that was terrible. We pulled out of the studio. We sacked those guys. And we had this record we had to finish. We hadn't even signed with Warner's at this stage. We had the plan of spending all this money and making this record and then selling it to someone, which fortunately we did. But we ended up roping in Alan Thorne, who had done Hoodoo Gurus, Paul Kelly, and I think probably Paul put us onto him. And he had this reputation and knack of being able to record a band to sound like the band. So he wasn't into too much trickery, but he'd make a band sound really good. And I think that's what he did. And he used some of the old tracks as basic tracks. I think River is Wide, and you can hear it almost sounds Well, that is kind of machine drums on that, which is kind of weird for our band at the time. And yeah, we finished it off in probably under 2 weeks with him, and it sounded great, and we were happy with it, and we were on our way, and we used him for the next 2 albums.
Yeah. And I mean, as much as that may have been a bit of a torturous experience for you, I mean, some of the songs that sort of set up the career weddings parties, anything are on there, but there's also some amazing. And I'm assuming you played some quite different keyboards aside from the accordion. So, I mean, one of my favourite songs of all time is The Infanticide of Marie Farrar. It's not the most uplifting song, but it's an incredible song.
Yeah, it's not a party song.
No, it's definitely not a party song. But I think there's some interesting, from memory, keyboards. Is there an organ on? I'm trying to recall.
Organ on that one, yeah.
And it's just, the atmospheres you worked in, even across that first album as young blokes. I mean, it's quite an achievement, even if you didn't realise it at the time.
Well, yeah, look, I barely played any other keyboards. I've taught myself to play piano as a member of weddings parties, anything. Like, I could play the organ. Organ's easier to play than piano, as you would probably know, just to pick up. So the piano on Away Away, which is a little backing track, that's actually Dave Steele playing that one.
Right.
But I did the organ on Marie Farrar. Yeah, we're always willing to just, whatever's in the studio model work, we'll have a crack at.
Yeah. And you've raised a good point that I probably should have asked earlier, and that is, as far as keyboards, as you said, you learnt it within the band. Obviously, playing accordion, you know your way around a keyboard. But yeah, what sort of were the extra bits and pieces you have picked up over the years that, I mean, I watched you live a few months back. You're obviously an accomplished player. What was the learning experience like for you?
Oh, it's just been a gradual thing, just get better and better as you go along. My piano playing, I think my right hand's very good. My left hand is poor and perfunctory as I play live, really. If I can get the bass notes coming through and a little bit of the rhythm of it and a little bit of the maybe some arpeggio, but yeah, I'm not too adventurous with the left hand of the piano. It's more the right hand.
It's not that you're not adventurous, Wal, it's the fact that you don't get in the way of the bass player. You're very thoughtful.
Exactly, yes.
So after Scorn of the Women was released, obviously you already had residencies, you were always gigging, and I mean, Away Away is one of Wedding Party's Anything's signature songs. What was the gap between when that came out on the album and that really took off and sort of, turbocharged the band?
It was pretty quick. I know it was released. We had this debate come up when we were touring New South Wales recently of a punter who said he'd heard it in 1986, and we said, no, it was 1987. It was released, and we knew that. But it turned out that it was actually released in a couple of regional markets in 86. Newcastle, possibly Geelong, I'm not sure, but that was the thing. Record companies did that at that time. I'd send it out to radio stations to try and get them interested. And they play it in regional stations just to get interest and to see if it was going to fly or not. And so, yeah, it would have come out before the album. Yeah, look, it got airplay. I don't know, how do you get that these days? We got lots of airplay. And the album was it felt like the album was going to be hot by the time it came out. And subsequently went with a bullet to number 41 and then turned around and went back out again. But,
but 41's nothing to sneeze at, particularly, in that era where there was such hot competition.
Yeah.
Do you recall what the impact was, even if it may not have been financial at that stage, just on the gigs? You're suddenly finding you booked bigger gigs, you're travelling more widely, did you do a tour to support it? What was the sort of changes you noticed? Yeah,
look, the big impact really for us was certainly, I think we just managed to pay that record off 45 years later. But yeah, definitely live. We picked up much bigger crowds. We were touring. We were always touring.
Yeah.
We had a manager that just wanted us out on the road 10 months a year pretty much. We were always playing, and it'd be 4 or 5 days a week. So it does kind of tend to blur into each other. But I know we would have done a Scorn of the Women tour. But where that fits in with all the other stuff we were doing, who knows? I know we did a record launch at the Prince of Wales Hotel in St Kilda, and then we probably did 50 gigs leading up to that and another 50 the other end of that. So it was just constant touring. But we were getting around the country, and our manager at the time, and we had our issues at the end with him, And the constant touring was one of those. But one thing he was really good at, or two things, one was getting record deals, and two was getting us on big international shows. And we were doing these massive tours. I think the first time we played in Sydney was supporting, we were just playing these big blues tours. And then we got Steve Earle a bit later on. And he was really, and you too,
Yeah.
That was a few years later. But yeah, he had an amazing ability to get us on these big shows. And that really got us going quickly and got us moving quickly. And it wasn't always you play these shows and the crowds pick up the next week. Sometimes it's 2 years, 3 years later, someone will come and say, I saw you at the Robert Cray show at Sydney Town Hall. And we went, oh, wow, okay. And then they'd seen our name or a record had come out and people would go, oh, I remember that band. I might just go and see them. So you get an immediate kick off it, and you get a long-term kick off those kind of shows as well too.
And so I'm fascinated, about the Robert Cray or Johnny Winter. They're, really respected artists, but they're definitely a different style of music to you. And we're going to talk a little bit later the first time I saw you live. Yeah. But you guys weren't to be fucked with, and you had a real energy, and aggression's probably too strong a word, but you were out there. How did the crowds respond at a Robert Cray concert when Weddings came on to play a gig?
Yeah, look, I know it wasn't blues, and we were playing hard, but I don't know. I think it felt like people liked us.
Yeah, good.
So yeah, the first one, that first Sydney show was Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Wow, yeah, well, that makes, yeah.
And Double Trouble, and Johnny Vaughan, his brother, the Fabulous Thunderbirds with the support band. And yeah, that was the first show we did in Sydney.
Wow.
And it's pretty weird. But the crowds, yeah, they always seem pretty generous, and they seem to like us. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so, I mean, it was only it was 88, I think, you released the second full studio album, Roaring Days. So that was, you'd started doing some of those bigger gigs. Was it a better recording experience for you second time around as far as a full album?
Fuck yeah. Yeah, it was much better. We went back in with Alan Thorne to 301 Studios in Sydney. Took longer than it does these days. I know we were still of the mindset that you had to go and spend a lot of money and record slowly. I mean, our last album we did in New Zealand with Mick at Roundhead took 10 days for 10 songs. But in those days it took a while. But yeah, I felt happy. Everyone was sort of chilled, and we knew what we were doing. We felt like we were in control. It didn't feel like we were being pushed around by a rogue producer and engineer.
Exactly. And any highlights you recall from that experience? Or, I mean, again, there are so many songs on that tended to be staples in your set list, but were there particular highlights for you as a player that you still, look back and enjoy those songs?
Yeah, we don't play a lot of that. If we go back, we tend to play more off Scorn of the Women.
Yeah.
Well, like Away. We've barely played a gig in our careers where we haven't played Away. And it's still one of my favourite songs to play. And Marie Farrar's just come back into the set.
Yeah.
Pegging and Cole's off that, is it? No, that's off.
That's Big Don't Argue, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of you got Roaring Days, Industrial Town, Under the Clocks.
Under the Clocks probably is the big one for me.
Yeah.
And we've done 3 versions of it now. The last one was a really quiet acoustic version with some just nice organ basses through it and melodica in the solo. And yeah, I love that song, and that's another one that's been with us forever. A lot of those songs like, say, Roaring Days, we won't play with this band because there's certain songs which are wedding songs.
Yeah.
And when the weddings do come out and play, and it has a few times over the years and may or may not come out again, but songs like that and Sergeant Small and Scorn of the Women, they'll be wedding songs forever.
That's right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I'm definitely not going to drag you through a disc by disc breakdown, but I do have to cover 89's Big Don't Argue. And was that a fairly close time between 88 and Roaring Days and Big Don't Argue? Did you maybe didn't do quite as much touring there, that you were back in the studio sooner than you were before between the first and second albums?
Oh, no, we were still fucking touring.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was just, instead of going home, we went to Memphis to make a record.
Yeah, there you go.
The touring didn't stop. And then we went right across Canada at the same time too, and then flew down to Memphis to play. I think Canada was after the recording. In fact, I'm sure it was, because we might have done, I reckon we did some before. We flew to Memphis, recorded there, and then went back to Canada, and we did another month or two up there. It was outrageous. It was just soul-destroying touring, but we thought that's what you did, and we did it. Memphis was a brilliant experience, and getting to work with Jim Dickinson and famous studio like Ardent Studio, and just immersing yourself in Memphis music and culture. It's an exciting place to be.
Yeah. And so this is where I do play punter / fanboy for a second. So in the intro, I've talked about what an amazing band you were and you are as a musician, still are. So amongst playing Canada and going to Memphis in, I think it was March 1989, you played Charles Sturt University of Wagga Wagga, of all places. I wouldn't expect for a minute that you would remember it, but you played the Uni Bar at Charles Sturt University of Wagga in March 1989. I basically didn't know weddings, parties, anything. I think I might have heard Away once or twice. A guy that I was dorming with from Paran said, mate, you've got to go and see these guys. I decided to, and you guys came on stage, launched into Streets of Forbes. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Again, I would argue the aggression. You guys just radiated, do not fuck with us. I think it was Peter Lawler was in a Shearer's singlet. He was your bass player, wasn't it? It was just do not fuck with us. And I was just, that gig was still to this day is the best gig I've ever seen in my life. Wow. So it's just, and I mean, it's backed by the strength of those songs in the Big Don't Argue. And I mean, you had co-writes. I know Pig and Cole's one you co-wrote, wasn't it? And then, so just tell us about, aside from being in Memphis and recording, just what was the sort of songwriting and collaboration process for that album, if you recall?
Well, look, they're pretty much always mixed songs.
Yeah.
Peggy and Cole, when I was a kid and just mucking around, I'd just come up with this tune, which I used to play on the accordion and, drag out at, mum and dad's kind of get-togethers or something like that. And Mick said, you got any songs at one stage? And I said, I got this tune. And I played it and he went, oh, that's cool. And I didn't hear anything more about that. And then a couple of years later, he said, I've written a song around that tune. And that was Peggy and Cole. So he'd taken that tune and 2 years later and turned it into a song. So I've never done much sitting down and collaborating with Mick. No. He's pretty much on it. And then other people will get songs. Dave Steele obviously got a lot of songs on the first two albums. Pete's had the occasional one as well too.
But is it more collaborative perhaps, as far as when you're in the studio and, I mean, you're obviously putting forward your accordion or keyboard parts. It's more collaboration of, let's try this. Does that work? That sort of stuff.
Oh, for sure. Look, some of the songs he might bring to us will be pretty much fully formed and you know exactly what he wants. Other ones, it's the basic, tune, rhythm, words, and we'll all fall around it. And I might have a riff that works and it sticks and stays in there. Like some of the times he brought the riffs to the band as well to a song. But of course, he's very generous with letting people have their head as musicians. And I think he really loves that about working with people. Yeah. He wants to work to their strengths.
And for the sake of our non-Australian listeners, and I know that you do have a big fan base in Europe and the US in different segments, but for those unaware, album one might have featured the murder of a baby. This third album featured, cannibalism, and these guys managed to pull it off in a beautiful way. So I'll be linking to all these albums in the show notes, including the more recent ones. They're definitely worth checking out. So I'm going to now fast forward it a bit, as far as, I mean, this is only the first three albums. I mean, you had another four after that, let alone the live albums. They Were Better Live is one of the best live albums I've had the pleasure of listening to. Just across all of that remaining to the career, and even talking about the U2 support and stuff, what was sort of the peaks and troughs for you across those remaining years where you thought, I can't believe I'm doing this?
Look, the band really changed in '94. The drummer left, Pete left, and we brought Michael Barclay in to play drums. We brought in Jen Anderson not long after that, and Irish O'Prey also joined on bass. So, and that lineup is basically whenever the weddings play.
Yeah.
That's the lineup. That's 25 years later. It's the longest serving lineup of weddings. And we became a band. We got to the end of the two pretty good big albums, Difficult Loves and then King Tide. But through money management from out of their control a little bit, we were broke and in massive debt. And we brought in our manager, we were sacked, and we brought in a guy called Peter Hayes from Perth, who had been our tour manager, and he used to be our booking agent in Perth, and we knew him quite well, and we were really good friends with him, but he's a very canny money man. So he took over, and the first thing he said is, okay, no more wages for you guys. When you work, you'll get paid. Because we were just getting per diems, and it was outrageous.
Okay, yeah.
And he said, we can't afford to go to Europe. We can't afford to go to America. We can't do all this kind of stuff. And we just worked our asses off and worked the debt off, basically. And we do these tours. So our new Europe around about that time became West Australia. Broome, Derby, Port Hedland, and we'd do the whole drive up with this truck full of gear behind us with a PA in it, and a couple of the local Perth roadies just driving up all around the country, and then Darwin as well too. So that became our new Europe, really.
Yeah.
And we toured constantly with it, and it was really great for the band, and together we drove each other absolutely fucking mad. Particularly Irish just drove us insane. Because you'd be driving for 18 hours and he wouldn't shut up for the whole fucking thing. But anyway, that's hi Irish if you're watching. God bless you. But yeah, we really didn't do a great deal of recording after that because we just didn't have the budget to do so, and we were working too much. And we ended up doing the album Riveresque, which was down in Tasmania, 96, 97, and we did a little EP, Donkey Serenade, as well, an independent record, Donkey Serenade. But yeah, we managed to get a deal with Mushroom and did Riveresque. And for me, that's still our best album.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I just love that. It sounds like us. It sounds like our most natural record. I think we'd finally decided that, hey, why can't we just be in a studio and just play the song all together at the same time? Imagine that. And it just sounds really calm and lovely and beautiful. Weddings-wise, that's my favourite record.
Yeah. It sounds like a band, for what it's worthwhile, that it's incredibly mature, master of their craft, experienced, confident in their own skin, and it certainly shows through. It's amazing album. And so I'm going to do a brutal summary, and please correct me because I probably got this wrong. But from what I've seen in the media and stuff, as far as the finish of weddings was really around just you're in a box in weddings parties, and there are expectations from punters. As gigs tend to go a certain way, and from what I can gather, Mick wanted a bit more freedom to do things a little bit differently. I'm assuming that's a basically fair summary.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair summary. And he's said publicly a few times, he just exactly what you've said. He felt like we had to play the gigs. We had to play the song where people chuck the coins. We had to play the song where people slam dance and jump into each other. But we had to do this. Yeah, it just felt like we were sort of going nowhere with that. I mean, I would have been happy to keep going, but when Mick dragged me aside and took me up to did we go to the Peacock or we went to the Northcote Social Club? I can't remember, for a beer, and said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And I said, yeah, okay, I can see that. And I supported that.
Yeah.
And I was happy to go with that. And I had 2 little kids at the time.
Yeah.
So I wasn't as keen to tour as much. So that was fine with me. I know particularly Michael Barclay and Irish, and even a little bit Paul, were against it because they hadn't been in the band as long as well. I think they were a bit sadder just to let it go than the rest of us.
Yeah. Those last gigs. So what was the time between calling it quits? What was some of the gigs, was that what went on the live album? Some of those more closer to the end gigs, or am I dreaming that?
Oh, it was towards the end of the live album. I would have thought it might have been the year before.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so
Christmas show, I think.
yeah, so do you recall what those last couple of gigs were like? Was it a thing that you were all feeling the weight of it, or it was just, for you guys, it was another couple of gigs and felt a bit sad at the end?
We announced at the start of the tour it would be the final tour. So all the punters were aware, we were aware, and it definitely had a big buzz about that tour. And
Yeah.
it was the biggest tour we'd ever done. And we played the Central Club in Richmond was our big Christmas show every year in Melbourne. And it started off with 2 and then 3, and over the years it got bigger and bigger. I thought it was 9 we played, but Mick swears it's 8.
Yeah.
We'd 8 nights in a row leading up to Christmas Eve, all sellouts. And our manager used to be out the front with all the old ticket stubs and reselling them to punters so he could put an extra 100 people in. So they were massive, those shows. And then we went to Perth for the New Year's Eve show, which we played down Margaret River, and then New Year's Day, I believe it was, first or the second, I think it was New Year's Day. We played the Belvoir Amphitheatre on the outskirts of Perth, and there was 3,000 people turned up, and they were just queuing up for miles as we drove in after we came back after our sound check, and it was just like, wow, this is going to be something. And there was a lot of, in those days, there was still a lot of walk-ups. So I think we'd sold a couple of grand, and then we turned up and there's just people for miles, and Hazy's going, yeah, this is pretty good here. And that was with the waifs and titters, and it was an amazing night. Ended up with stage diving from me.
Yeah.
And whilst wearing the accordion, and it was like the last little, okay, see you later, everybody. And then about 4 or 5 days later, we did kind of like an invite-only show in Melbourne at the Corner Hotel. And
Nice.
Friends, family, industry, other bands. And it was about 500 people there, and everyone had to bring a plate.
Yeah.
And it was great fun. So we finished off in Melbourne in a really kind of beautiful way.
Yeah, that's amazing. And very last weddings question. Well, you mentioned supporting U2. I mean, they must have been some of the biggest as far as audience turning up gigs. Was that, I'm guessing, I actually don't know, I apologise, but was that the Lovetown tour sort of around the late 80s, I'm guessing?
Yeah, Love Comes to Town.
Yeah.
BB King. And us, yeah.
Did you?
Oh, it was massive. We were playing all these entertainment centres.
Yeah.
And getting to watch BB King play every night and getting to watch U2 play. Most nights we doubled out a lot.
Yeah.
Because, we didn't do enough gigs. So we'd be out playing somewhere else after the gig.
Wow.
And no, it was bizarre and exciting, and the bands couldn't have been more generous and nice to us. And the road crew were incredible for us. They just, you hear the reputations of these big crews treat the support bands like shit.
Yeah.
But they were fantastic. And I remember the last night, don't ask me who it was, I think it might have been Sydney. They did the whole U2 light show for us.
Wow.
So like the spotlights under us, as somebody would take a solo, and all the guys up above with the spotlights above the stage and the flashing lights, and they just turned it on for us. It was just really funny. They looked after us. And and the band were great. We didn't speak to Bono a great deal because, every time he walked out of his tiny band room into the larger band room, which was more public, and it was like a city backstage, he just got, surrounded by people. And so we left him alone. I had one or two really nice little chats with him, but he had to keep to himself a little bit. But the other guys found it easier to get out and do stuff, and they were really friendly to us.
Yeah. That's amazing. Did you ever run across Terry Lawless, who's their keyboard player that sort of does the keys for them? I think he was, even back then. He was the guy that would always be under the stage. I don't know whether you ever ran across him.
No, I can't recall meeting him.
No.
But fine. Yeah, I was aware there was a keyboard player under the stage.
Yeah. Thankfully, that was never you.
And I thought, I could do that.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you for that. And then obviously, post that last gig for family and friends and industry at the Corner Hotel, how soon was it when you were sort of jumping into other projects? And I do want to talk about some of the other amazing artists you've worked with, but just tell us a bit about that downtime and what you started to do in music after that period.
Well, even leading up to the end of the weddings, I've been playing with Sally Dastey from Titters for quite a while. We had a little band, which Pete Lawler was in and Paul Thomas was in, and myself and this drummer from Havenot Jones. And we had done the odd gig, and we were called the V-Necks, Sally Dastey and the V-Necks. And that was a pretty cool little band and very kind of soul rock, I suppose. Sal's got such an amazing sort of powerful but sweet voice as well too, and she's a brilliant soul singer. And we were playing the Continental in Melbourne a bit. We did a little residency there, and that went really well. So I had been playing with her quite a bit. V-Necks broke up, and we started another little band. I'm not sure how long it was after the weddings, maybe only a year or so. I wasn't playing a lot. I was certainly not touring like I used to, but I was playing little bits and pieces with Sal. We did a couple of tours, and we made 2 records, and yeah, that was really fun and exciting. She's a treasure, and Titters were a treasure. It was, some of my favourite works is with Sal.
Yeah. No, it is amazing music. And it probably stretch you in slightly different ways too musically, yeah?
Oh, for sure. Well, the V-Necks, for instance, I didn't play, I think maybe 1 or 2 songs I played accordion.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take it away from that and just play something different. So I was playing organ, mainly organ, a bit of piano, and a couple of songs on accordion. And yeah, you're playing different stuff, and there was, particularly when I sort of went out with Sal after that, there was a lot more room for improvisation because the stuff was kind of slightly jazzier. So that was a bit of fun as well.
And so what was the sort of lag between weddings finishing up, you're doing that sort of work, amazing work as well, and before Mick gives you the call again when he's starting his next project?
Well, his next project, he did some, after weddings, he did some solo stuff, and then he went and toured Europe with McCartney, and then the Shore thing, obviously.
Yeah.
I've been playing, look, I'm probably on 3 or 4 of the Shore thing records. And if I was in the same place as him, I'd quite occasionally get up and do a gig with him as well too. But I was never in that band. And then I reckon it was about 2010. He called me and said, "I got this gig up in Bendigo. So do you want to come up?" It was just a little in the footy club kind of this local people were running a little gig in the bottom bar of the footy club rooms, and said, "Yeah, that sounded like a bit of fun." And we had one rehearsal and headed up there, and he said, "Oh, what did you think of that?" And I said, "Yeah, that was good fun. I really enjoyed doing that." He said, "Oh, well, I'm not doing the Shore thing anymore. What do you reckon we start up something else?" And I went, "Fuck yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to." And yeah, the Roving Commission was born. And initially that was me and him. And that was kind of the pun in the name that, it was whoever was about, would be the drummer or the bass player or other singers or whatever. So that lineup changed a lot over the first few years.
Yeah.
And often from gig to gig. But yeah, that became more and more regular. And all of a sudden, you're back in a band again and you're touring a lot and you're playing a lot and you're recording a lot. And it was back to what I've been doing for so many years earlier. And I felt like I'd sort of really never left.
That's right.
You're just falling really easily. I know what he likes to do, how he likes the songs to be. And yeah.
Actually, you raised a good question there, Walt. So I was going to ask, I mean, you and Mick have been playing alongside each other on and off for basically around nearly 40 years. Scary.
Well, it is 40.
It
was 40 this year there
you go.
May,
Yeah. And so how's your musical shorthand evolved with each other? So, I mean, as you said, you tend to know what he likes. Do you tend to even need to discuss arrangements and stuff anymore when you're preparing for a gig, or is it, pretty instinctual a lot of the time now?
Certainly not when we're preparing for the gig, because hopefully we've got it rehearsed enough by the time we get there. But yeah, there's always arrangements to be done. There's ideas he's got and ideas I have, and you work around that. And also, you're working with a 6-piece band now, so you have to be working around everyone, and particularly another instrumentalist like Jen Anderson, who's got her own ideas and is also got an amazing talent for arrangement and ideas and parts. So you're still working through stuff, even though I know what to do. It might get to the end and you're saying, what about that? Why don't you try something else? What do you think? You got any other ideas? I'll play piano on this one or play organ on this one.
Yeah.
We'll throw it around. So you're still always throwing stuff around. It's not, there's a lot of work going to the arrangements we still make.
What do you think your secret of success? I mean, it's no mean feat. Every band will have creative debates in songs, in recording studios and whatever. I mean, you've outlasted so many different lineups and iterations of mixed bands, so to speak. How, you two obviously would have, sorry, I shouldn't use argy-bargy for our non-Australian listeners. I'm sure you've had some creative debates over the years, but you obviously make it work. It just, you tend to respect each other's view and agree to disagree. Like, it just seems to work.
I think the different lineups of the band have had different dynamics, I suppose. At the moment, it's pretty strong and everyone seems to be on the same page. There's been times where it hasn't happened, particularly in the weddings at some stage early on. There was differences. But ultimately, it's mixed band.
Yeah.
Particularly the Roving Commission. The weddings was more of a 5 than 6 part kind of partnership.
Yeah.
But the way his songs. But ultimately with the Roving Commission and the Shaw thing, it's mixed band. So it gets the final say, which is totally fair enough. But he doesn't always agree with what we're doing, but like I said before, he gives the band their head and really trusts them to do the right thing for the song.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Which is, it's huge credit to him. And so this is probably the time to ask about accordions. So over the years, how many have you had and what's that beautiful thing in the background that you've got there now? Is that your go-to?
Yes. I don't know how much of that you can see. This is an accordion I got when I was about 12.
Wow.
12, 13, 14 maybe. I don't know. It's a Giulietti. It's an Italian instrument. I've had it, and there was 2 of these. Mum had one as well. And
have you had that refurbished? Well, because it's in immaculate condition. It looks amazing from here. Is it been refurbished?
No, it's been repaired a few times because it gets the shit beaten out of it.
Yeah.
No, it's held together by gaffer tape, really, pretty much. And I've had that since I was a kid. And Mum had one, and then when she stopped playing, she gave me hers. So I've alternated between the two, and they're pretty much the same. There's a few differences with the bass side of it and the amount of sounds you can get out of it. But I've alternated between the two. As one tends to get tired and worn out or needs repair, I'll go to the other one and then change that over again later. But really, in the early days of the weddings, they were purely recording instruments for me. And I would buy a cheap one and take it on tour, and quite often it might last a year and then would be falling apart because of the sweat and the strain, and they're just not built for the kind of shows we were doing in those days in particular. So we had this kind of arrangement because the band would buy the guitar players their strings and the straps, and they would spend a fortune on that over the year because they changed it every couple of gigs, and we're doing a lot of gigs. So the arrangement was that they would buy me an accordion every year.
That's good.
So I would, and because, that's what it was being used for. There was an asset for the band. And I had no other sort of expenses that I was impinging on the band as far as instruments goes.
And I mean, that makes sense because that's why I'm commenting on how good it looks. They're not the ones you were taking out on tour, because I'm thinking that's an amazing quality of accordion for something that's, had 40 years of touring. So that makes sense now.
Yeah, well, it's been on tour for the last, certainly since the stuff with Sal, I'd imagine.
I think it's safe.
20 years.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say though your live gigs are marginally more sedate than they were back in the
greatly, 80s. So that's why I'm able to take that one out. Although it is getting enormously heavy.
Yeah.
As I get older, and I've been looking for a smaller version that's still got just as much power and puts out as much volume and still sounds as nice. And I'm finding it difficult to find one that costs under 10 grand. So
that's the trouble.
I'm holding off on that for the moment.
Yeah. And I'm assuming the MIDI accordions and stuff probably aren't a lot lighter anyway, are they?
Oh, no, they're actually a bit heavier.
Yeah, there you go.
As far as I know, I've never bothered with that. I can't see the point doing it, to be honest.
No.
I'd rather play the keyboard than have a MIDI accordion.
And I imagine when you're touring, while that you basically are you carding your own keyboard? Like when I saw you before Christmas, you were playing a Nord. Like, is that yours, or you're just tending to pick one up where you're touring? Depends on the tour, or
It depends on the tour. Look, most of the time, 90% of the time, I'll take that as an Electro 3, and it's just a good, solid stage keyboard that suits what I play. I play organ, play a bit of Wurlitzer, play a bit of piano, and none of my other sounds are particularly adventurous because of the music I play, and we've never felt the need to expand into other keyboards. And the Nord's just a great stage beast. It just does its job, and it sounds good, and it's easy to play and easy to cart around as well too.
yeah. And one question you just prompted me on, I hadn't planned on asking. You mentioned about accordions being heavy, and obviously as we get older, that gets harder and harder. But even back, when you're in your 20s and early 30s, how did you maintain the stamina of the gigs you were playing? Was it just beer fueled and you were young and just coped with it, or was there actually a bit more behind it than that?
Pretty much beer and Sudafed, I think.
Yeah, good answer.
Yeah. I don't know. You're a bit younger and your back's a bit stronger, and
Yeah.
you're doing it every night. You get match fit, I suppose.
Now, one thing I definitely want to mention is back in 1991, you released a solo album. Now, I've listened to it on YouTube, so those out there will be linking to it. It's the best ever cover version of Back on the Chain Gang I've ever heard. But tell us about what made you decide to do that, and is there ever any chance of a reissue, even on streaming services?
Yeah, I don't know about streaming. I have no idea. I wouldn't know how to put it up. Or whether we even would be able to do it through Go Records. And Mick came up with the idea. I think he said, you should do a silly solo recording record. And I said, it's not going to be silly. It's going to be very serious.
Yeah.
I saw it on Discrepancy Records, actually, it was about $150.
Yes, there you go.
Presently. But Discrepancy, they have some outrageous prices on their website. So I thought, you're dreaming, guys.
Yeah, so if you got, oh, wow. It's a great cover. Do you remember who designed the cover?
Pete Lawler.
Well, there you go.
He's a really talented artist. And he did that and designed and illustrated, it says. So, he must have designed it. It's kind of like a retro kind of
love it.
Old jazz record kind of style thing, but there's a bit more colour.
Yeah.
And then there's a little blurb on the back, which you can't read.
No,
but
that's real.
But it just tells tells a semi-fictional version of my upbringing and a number of lies, just as you would get on a jazz record, from that time, of all the amazing things I did at the time and all lies about them. Yes, but no, it's some truth in there.
Yeah, look, and it's a hell of a variety in the set list. As I said, it's got everything from a cover of Back on the Chain Gang to the North Melbourne football song. You name it, it's got it. It's so great. It's really good.
Including the last song, a song called The Dark Island, which is a duet with me and my mum.
There you go. I hadn't got that far. I'll be listening to that. There you go. That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So what have you got that on, David?
It's on, so you can find it on YouTube. The whole album is on YouTube.
Yeah, I think I've seen it there before.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And do you have, in the back of your mind, any desire to do anything else solo yourself, or?
No, not really. We work, we're having a quiet year, or I am. Mick's not. He's always working. He's doing the solo tour at the moment. But I'm enjoying just the time away from it. I don't feel any need to push myself to go out and play and do stuff.
No, fair call. And 3 last questions, Wal. So one is there a memorable train wreck story when you've been on stage, doesn't matter which band, when, where or why, where something's gone spectacularly wrong?
Well, probably, there's been a few of them. There was, I reckon, if it wasn't the first gig we ever did in Canada, it was the first gig of a particular tour. We played at a place called Hamilton, Ontario, and it was a great big huge room and no one came to see us. And the 20 people that came to see us were right up the back of this room. From memory, it seems like it was the size of an aircraft hangar. Well, I'm sure it wasn't anything like that, but it was just this big room, chrome, glass and all this kind of stuff, and a stage which was in a semicircle. So I'm on the edge there, so the others there, and in darkness I felt one stage I walked too far and I was teetering over, and I'm going to fall, and I just sort of jumped into the crowd, which were 100 meters away, and I was sure there was a rock move which looked particularly good, but that was nowhere near the biggest, because the gig before that was our last gig in Australia before we went overseas, and it was the Manly Vale Hotel in Sydney. And yeah, I used to jump up and down with the accordion, take these big leaps and stuff like that, and generally got away with them. But this one particular night, and I think we might have been doing away. So it was towards the end of the set, and I'd jump, and might have been a little riser. I jumped off. No, there wouldn't have been, because the drums were on the floor level. But anyway, I'm trying to get my balance, and I'm falling this way and falling that way, and I managed to knock over, firstly, my amp, and then I swung back, and I got the hi-hat and drum kit, and then leant over into mix amp. In the end, I took the entire drum kit and my amp and mix amp, and I reckon there was a couple of guitar holders, and
Wow.
yeah, look, I took out half the stage pretty much. And the band just stopped and looked at me in the middle of the song. Mick's going, "What the fuck are you doing, Wallace? It's all under control. It's all good. It's all under control. I'm good."
That is gold.
I was renowned for falling on stage.
Yeah.
That was one of my great talents. But that Manly Vale Hotel, that was the king of them.
It's amazing. Thank you. And here's a really simple and easy question. Well, what legacy do you want to leave in a music sense when you're dead and gone in 50 years?
That's a very deep question there, David. But I don't know. Just I don't have a real. I'm not on a mission.
Yeah.
To push the accordion in a modern context, but even though it's not a mission, it's something that I'm really proud of. And I've lost count of the amount of people have come up to me and said, "You inspired me to take over the accordion, or my kid to play the accordion," and that does mean a lot, because I think there's a big place for it in modern music.
Absolutely.
And that probably means a lot. Just
yeah,
there's a place. I want people to know there's a place for it, and you can do it, and you can make a career out of it. And as difficult as it may seem sometimes to get it into that modern context to a young player, just remember, everyone wants a guitarist. Not many people want an accordion player, so there's a lot less competition there, and that's easier.
Exactly.
But going back to the very, very start, and you're talking about where I started. I mean, before I'd been to the audition with Mick, in that initial letter, I've been listening to, I think I'd bought the album by ZZ and the English post-punk band.
Yeah.
And the song, what was it? This Is the Day, had a very strong accordion song sound through it.
There you go.
And I remember listening to that when I was about 6 again. Wow, that's so cool. I really love that. And it's still one of my favourite little songs. And I remember saying to Mick, he said, "What do you see with the accordion?" I said, "Oh, this band called ZZ," and I don't think Mick was particularly into it. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, okay." But I think you could probably hear it now. But it was the accordion in the modern context, and it was just a really exciting moment for me, and that got me interested in doing it. So yeah, it's to bring it into modern music, really, and to have its rightful place.
Yeah, no, extremely well put. And I was going to ask you too, as far as musical influences going into the formation of Weddings Pays Anything. And I know over the years you had what I would argue is incredibly positive, but I don't think it's a real comparison as far as, Australia's Pogues, the Pogues, all that sort of stuff, just because of the genre has been similar and just the force of the performance and everything else. But what were the actual musical influences, do you think, that sort of influenced you over the
Well, starting off, the Pogues weren't particularly an influence on the Weddings. I mean, we were sort of going. I think they'd been going before us, but no one had really heard them out here.
Yeah.
At the time, and there'd been some word of this band out of England that does a similar thing, and they are, I suppose, but They're much more, particularly early on, much more tune-based, and we did do the odd tune in some of our songs as well too. Like Whiskey in a Jar was a big live song of ours, and there was a tune at the end of that every time. Look, I was with, how do I put this? Look, Mick's influences were probably what was driving the band, and the music he was putting me onto at the time, and that was, you know, Ray Davies and the Kings, or might have been the Byrds or Dylan, and all that kind of stuff. And we were listening to a lot of that stuff and playing a lot of those songs, and we're playing a song by Squeeze, and all this kind of stuff. And so the influences were coming from all folk pop kind of sort of thing. And I've always been very much into pop music, and still am. I probably listen to that more than I do folk music, to be honest, even though I love some folk music. Absolutely. So, and a lot of the accordion parts, if you listen back with another band, they could easily be a brass part. And I think musically, I was leaning towards taking little stings like that and using them in songs as much as I was like a Celtic riff or anything like that.
Last question, while the dreaded Desert Island disc question. So we talked before the show, and I'm giving you a pass for 6 rather than 5. So your top 6 albums.
And I think I mentioned to you that a couple of days, watched your episode with Steve Neve. From Elvis Costello's Attractions. And he was asked that question. He said, but it changes every week.
It does.
And I go, and it does totally. But I thought, well, I could play the 5 or 6 that I'm listening to at the moment, there's 4 or 5 songs bands which I'm totally obsessed by at the moment. But I'm not going to go that. I'm going to try and go the old classics, because I think that's what what this segment should be, I think, really, as opposed. So I dragged them out earlier. So number 1, I reckon this is it's almost the perfect album, pop album, and it is Kirsty MacColl's Kite.
Nice.
And it's just magic from start to finish. It's just brilliantly played, arranged, sung, played. Steve Lillywhite, her husband at the time, produced it. It's just a magical record, and just one banger after another. Just
great.
Incredible pop songs. And she was pretty hard-ass politically, and she's taken swipes at all sorts of rich dudes and dumb blokes and all these people. And, she's a absolute favourite of mine. I love her to bits.
Amazing.
So sad to lose her in a tragic way.
It was.
Then 2 albums I've got by Joe Boyd produced artists. Joe Boyd did all of Fairport, who were unlucky to miss out here, and he started with Pink Floyd, and he did the Incredible String Band, and he did all these amazing things. But this one here, Nick Drake's 5 Leaves Left, was one of his, and it's an absolute masterpiece of a record, and the string arrangements are just mind-blowingly incredible. It's just so beautiful, the record, and so heartbreaking, and I love it. And another one, which is Kate and Anna McGarrigle, and it's called Dancer with Bruised Knees. And Kate and Anna, and there's lots of beautiful accordion on this as well too. Kate plays a lovely accordion, and I reckon a third of the records sung in French. They were French Canadian,
right?
Or they were from there. It's just an absolutely beautiful record, and some heartbreaking songs. Kate was married to, was it Kate or Anna? Was married to Loudon Wainwright.
Wow.
And they had a very bitter breakup, and he was pretty bad to her, she would have said. And so there's a couple of pretty vicious songs towards him as well too, but also this song called The Walking Song, which is about going for a walk with him, and it's just heartbreakingly beautiful as well too, and really lovely message and sentiment towards a time with him as well too. So
can't wait to listen to that one.
That is fucking do yourself a favour, kids. Get into that. And more of a keyboard-based one, because this is a Keyboard Chronicles podcast. Air and Moon Safari.
Yeah, such a great album. Yeah.
Which I only bought about 2 years ago, and I was aware of the band just one of those bands back in
Yeah.
your periphery somewhere. And I bought the record and went, wow, this is just insanely good. And great songs, great keyboards. It's just,
Yeah, amazing album, that one.
it's fabulous. And it's just about my most listened to record, I reckon, over the last year.
There you go.
There's a lot I go back to. But yeah, probably my most listened to, I'd reckon.
And you still got two, what?
Okay, well, there's some low-key ones there, not all low-key. So we need to have Party on the Beach.
Los Lobos.
Nice. Will of Wolf Survive, their debut album.
Yeah, amazing.
And song after song, you just want to get up and dance. And if you're having a drink, that's the best thing. It's just so much fun.
Great
and
band.
So exciting and vibrant, and love it. Steve Berlin almost produced the band at one stage, but it never worked out. The saxophone player. I think Vic Donaghy he was going to do, because that was another tour we got with Steve.
Wow.
And he asked us about it, but it didn't work out, and we ended up going to Memphis to work with Jim.
There you go.
That was close as well too.
Yeah, wow.
And last one I bought this year, and of course, because it's a keyboards podcast, I had to pick this one as well too. From 1959, Nina Simone at Town Hall. Beautiful. Which I've been listening to non-stop as well too. It's just so beautiful. And there's some amazing YouTube clips of her too. There's a concert in Montreux, I think from 1974, the Jazz Festival. And it's just hard-assed and brutal and brilliant and beautiful. She's an amazing piano player. She was inspired pretty much by classical Bach and other classical music. And you can sort of hear that in her playing. And she just bashes the piano sometimes. She's hitting it so hard, but she's so dexterous and it's brilliant, you know. And the voice, of course. But yeah, so that was my number 6, and I only got 6 because, you know, it's a piano album.
That's right. No, I love it.
I thought that was fair enough.
Well, I can't thank you enough. You've been incredibly generous with your time. And going back to the impact question, you know, you have definitely made an enormous impact both in Australia and internationally. And as you said, positioning the accordion as an instrument that fits into pretty much any genre in the modern context. But you've also had a huge impact on just musicians generally. I know you've had a big impact on me. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, David. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed it.
And there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that. I know Australian viewers and listeners of the podcast will particularly enjoy that, particularly if you're Melbourne-based or Victoria-based. People of a certain vintage understand what an iconic band, wedding parties, anything were. They were true groundbreakers. They dominated the scene in their own very distinctive way. And as you heard, I admitted to being a fanboy and a punter in part of it, and for legitimate reason. As I said, just amazing band. Mick Thomas and the Roving Commission, if you do get a chance to see them, or Mick Thomas solo, I know he does a bit of overseas work as well. It is money extremely well spent. They are just such an amazing band, and Mick Thomas is an amazing songwriter and singer and raconteur as well. So yeah, huge thanks to Wal for his time. It's hugely appreciated. It was an absolute honour to catch up with him. Thank you as always for listening. We super appreciate it. I do want to give a big shout out to our gold and silver supporters. Starting from most recent, the brilliant Troy Kinnett. Troy plays keyboards with John Mellencamp, but also does a lot more besides. Definitely do check out Troy's website at troykinnett.com. That's TroyKinnett.com. So thank you, Troy, for your support. The amazing Greg Kane at Hue and Cry. Same for Greg. Do check out Hue and Cry. I've got an amazing new album out. It's been on heavy rotation for me, and I do highly recommend that as well. Thank you, Greg. The brilliant Paul Heaton, or the Dreamscapist, as he's known on YouTube. He's regularly releasing new content. I noticed the other day he's released a couple of great new pieces in the last couple of months. Do search for the Dreamscapist on YouTube. The brilliant Dewi Evans from the sunny land of Wales. Thank you, sir, as always. It was great to be joined by you on the live stream we did over the weekend. Although by the time this comes out, this is about 8 weeks after that. But anyway, thank you, Dewi, as always. The brilliant Mike Wilcox at midnightmastering.com. Thank you, sir, as always. the lovely Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you as always for your long-term support. You've been an enormous inspiration for a long time now. And the longest of all is the musicplayer.com forums. Dave Bryce and the team at the Keyboard Corner in particular. Thank you, team. It's such a great forum to hang out with. Do keep in touch. We love hearing your suggestions. Wal at the end of the show gave me some great suggestions for potential guests that I'll be following up on. We always love hearing your recommendations. Do keep in touch either on email, editor@keyboardchronicles.com. We're regularly available to respond on Facebook, Instagram. We are on Reddit. But even good old email does work quite well. So again, thank you for listening. We'll be back in a week or so. And until then, keep on playing.